Hello, students. I am so glad you're here with me in this episode. In each episode, my hope is you learn, grow, and thrive as a person through learning different skills in reading, writing, speaking, and listening in English. The focus of this week's episode is literary criticism. This episode is a supplementary learning material for your Quarter 3 Learning Activity Sheet 3. The most essential learning competency that this lesson is aiming you to develop is the skill to compose an independent critique of a chosen selection based on the following approaches: Structuralism, Formalism, Moralism, Marxism, Feminism, Historicism, and reader response. But before we talk about what literary criticism is, let's recall what literature is. Literature, in its broadest sense, is any written work. Literature can be classified according to whether it is fiction or nonfiction, and whether it is prose or poetry. It can be further distinguished according to major forms, such as the novel, short story, or drama. Fiction means literature made of imagination. Just think about the characters and events from novels you read, like The Fault in Our Stars or Paper Towns. Or maybe the fan fiction you read on Wattpad. They are all products of creative imagination. Nonfiction, on the other hand, means it is not made of imagination. But the thing is, literary nonfiction is still pleasurable to read because they are written creatively. Examples of nonfiction are essays, biographies, speeches, autobiographies, and memoirs. Now, what is literary criticism? Literary criticism is the analysis and interpretation of literary works using various approaches. Though the word criticism bears a negative connotation, literary criticism is not pointing out the flaws or the faults of a literary piece. On the contrary, the goal of literary criticism is to help us understand and appreciate the work more fully. Let's remember that literary criticism actually leans on the side of analysis and interpretation. Remember that I am going to use literary approaches and literary theories interchangeably throughout this episode, and I mean just the same thing. The literary theories or approaches to be discussed in this episode are structuralism, formalism, moralism, Marxism, feminism, historicism, and reader response. You will be delighted to know that there are still other literary approaches out there. But for the sake of this episode, we will focus on these approaches. How do you do literary criticism? You will need a literary approach or theory to analyze and interpret a piece of literature. Let's make an analogy. Imagine literary theory as a pair of lenses through which you view the text you're reading. The literary theory that you use to read a text will influence the way you view a text. That's why literary theories are also called literary lenses. These literary theories or approaches can help reveal the meaning of a literary piece. Same literary piece, different perspectives. Each literary approach makes you focus on particular aspects of the text. One literary approach or theory will make us read literature with a focus on socio-economic standpoint. Another literary theory will make us read with the intent on concentrating on female experiences. It's like the orthographic view. If you don't know what orthographic view is, it's a way of visualizing an object through different perspectives. So we have here an object, and the way it looks is different from various views or angles. So the view is different from top view, back view, right side view, bottom view, front view, and rear view. But the catch is, these views all pertain to the same object. In the same way, it's like literature being viewed through different lenses. I'm going to give you a rundown of what these literary approaches are going to focus. For moralism, it focuses on morals. Historicism on historical context. Marxism, conflict between the rich and the poor. Feminism, gender equality. Structuralism, universal patterns. Formalism, formal elements. And last but not least, reader response, meaning created by readers. Doesn't it sound so exciting? Various approaches on literary criticism will give us new sets of eyes. Before, we thought that there is only one correct analysis and interpretation of a literary piece. But with literary approaches, reading literature will never be the same again. Let's cut the chase and begin to explore literary approaches, aka literary theories. For my discussion, I will use The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins in seeing how each literary approach works. The first is moralism. Moralism is an approach that judges the value of a literary work based on its moral and ethical influence on its readers. The guide questions when using moralism are: does the text influence the reader toward good and noble behavior? How? Does the text promote wrong behavior? How? What lesson does the author present or teach in the text? Let's pick one guide question. What lesson does the author present or teach in the text? I have to say that there are a lot of morals we can glean from the Hunger Games, but one of the scenes that really stand out is when Katniss volunteers to be a tribute in the games to replace her younger sister, Prim. Katniss knows so well that Prim does have a very slim chance to survive in the games and be a victor. This ultimately taught us the lesson of self-sacrifice and responsibility. As the older sister, Katniss knows she is responsible to protect her sister even if it means sacrificing her own life. That is moralism. Now the next is historicism. Historicism is an approach that investigates the meaning of a literary work by asking questions about the author's life and times, the historical setting of the literary piece, and the author's intentions. The guide questions in using historicism are: who were the important people in the author's life? What books and ideas had major influence on the author? What social class did the author belong to? Are there any major cultural and historical events that happened while the author wrote the text? How are those events related to the literary work? Let's pick one guide question. And that is the second guide question: what books and ideas had major influence on the author? Do you still remember the myth Daedalus and Icarus? Recall that in Greek mythology, Icarus is famously known as the son of Daedalus, who became so proud in his heart he thought he could be like one of the gods by flying higher and higher and closer to the sun, despite his father's warnings. The wax in his wings melted and he fell to the sea. Now, if you already remembered Icarus, let's take some more steps back. Daedalus and Icarus had to escape because Daedalus betrayed King Minos by revealing to Theseus, a tribute from Athens, how to escape the labyrinth. Theseus killed the Minotaur and escaped the labyrinth and took with him Ariadne, the daughter of King Minos. So, why do I say all these things to you? Because Greek mythology had such a great influence to Suzanne Collins in writing The Hunger Games. She took the concept of tributes from the myth of Theseus. The next approach we're going to discuss is going to be Marxism. Marxism is an approach that focuses on how the economy system and social class oppresses the poor and promotes the interests of the dominant rich. When using Marxism, you have to ask yourself these guide questions. What social classes do the characters represent? What is the struggle among the social classes in the text? What tools do the upper class use to keep themselves in power? Government, media, religion, literature, art, technology? Do the characters from the lower class realize their lack of power? Or are they actively fighting against injustice? Let's pick one guide question. Let's choose this third. What tools do the upper class use to keep themselves in power? Government, media, religion, literature, art, technology. Before we answer this question, I want you to know this important term: capitalism. Capitalism is a system of economic production whereby business or owners or capitalists acquire the means of production or capital and hire workers who get paid for their labor. Capitalism is defined by private property rights, capital accumulation and reinvestment, free markets, and competition. While capitalism has certainly helped propel innovation and prosperity in modern society, it can also create inequalities and contribute to market failures. Capitalism has innovated the way the economy works. The reason why we have lots of products to choose from and why we can get them for reasonable prices is because of the free market and the competition that capitalism creates. But the main disadvantage is this: capitalism can create a huge wealth divide. Workers earn a fixed amount of salary despite working the whole day, but the top executives enjoy all profits. Let's look at this map of the nation of Panem, the setting of the novel The Hunger Games. The capital is the seat of government. The capital, in so many ways, represents the capitalist system, where the rich become richer and the poor become poorer. In order to retain itself in power, the Treaty of the Treason was created. Let's watch this to learn about that. Clearly, the tool that the capital uses to remain in power is the Hunger Games. Now, that is Marxism, and let's move on to feminism. Feminism is an approach that increases readers' sensitivities on how the nature, roles, and treatment of women are portrayed in a literary piece. The guide questions are the following: how do the male characters talk about the female characters? How do the male characters treat the female characters? How do the female characters act toward the male characters? Do you find the female characters conforming to traditional views on women? Or do you find the female characters challenging those traditional views? Based on the text, what are the expected roles and behaviors on women? What are the effects of these expectations? Let's pick one guide question, and we're going to pick this third one. Do you find the female characters conforming to traditional views on women, or do you find the female characters challenging these traditional views? Katniss is a strong female protagonist. We see it even in the beginning of the novel when she hunts illegally at the restricted area. However, her strength and courage are not the selling points she must bring into the games. She needs to be likable to win sponsors who will send her life-saving water and medicine. And that means she needs to be the female ideal who will capture the hearts of the spectators. Sina, her designated fashion designer, trusts her to make her memorable and beautiful. Not only that, she has to look physically attractive. Haymitch agrees with Peta that they should be matched as the star-crossed lovers. Then, at the end of the games, Katniss pretends to be vulnerable and harmless by portraying herself as a girl deeply in love with Peta, who would be willing to commit a suicide pact than to win the games alone. She had to conform to the female ideal to increase her chances in surviving the games. That was a long discussion. Let's have a mind break by looking at these photos. I hope those pictures refreshed you. Formalism is an approach that aims to appreciate the value of a literary work for its own properties without the influence of outside factors or connection. When we talk about formalism, it's all about the formal elements. And formal elements are the elements of fiction. Now let's dig into the guide questions for this literary approach. What figures of speech are used? Metaphors, similes, etc. How does the writer's word choice reveal or reflect the work's meaning? What tone and mood are created at various parts of the work? What is the effect of the plot and what parts specifically produce that effect? How do the elements work together in creating the overall meaning of the text? Let's pick one guide question. How does the writer's word choice reveal or reflect the work's meaning? Because you have to look at the formal elements of the literary piece when using formalism. You really have to do close reading. That's why I am going to show you an excerpt of The Hunger Games. Sitting at Prim's knees, guarding her, is the world's ugliest cat. Mashed and nose, half of one ear missing, eyes the color of rotten squash. Prim named him Buttercup, insisting that his muddy yellow coat matched the bright flower. He hates me, or at least distrusts me, even though it was years ago. I think he still remembers how I tried to drown him in a bucket when Prim brought him home. Scrawny kitten, body swollen with worms, crawling with fleas. The last thing I needed was another mouth to feed. But Prim begged so hard, cried even. I had to let him stay. It turned out okay. My mother got rid of the vermin and he's a born mouser. Even catches the occasional rat. Sometimes, when I clean a kill, I feed Buttercup the entrails. He has stopped hissing at me. The author's word choice or diction in describing Buttercup, Priam's pet cat, shows us that life in District 12 is difficult. Katniss and her family struggle to survive reflects Buttercup's struggle to survive too. If Katniss and her family were rich, Buttercup wouldn't look so ugly and wouldn't have to eat entrails as a meal. Next is structuralism. Structuralism is an approach which assumes that literary works have underlying universal structures. And the guide questions for structuralism are the following. What patterns, motives, or themes in this literary text are also found in other literary texts? What binary oppositions are repeated in the text? Good versus evil, old versus young, light versus darkness, etc. Are there patterns and elements within the text similar with other texts from other cultures? What do these similarities tell us about the common human experience? These three are just some of the guide questions when using the structuralist approach. Let's pick the third guide question. Are there patterns and elements within the text similar with other texts from other cultures? What do these similarities tell us about the common human experience? The Hunger Games is operating within a structure called the monomyth, aka the hero's journey. At first glance, we may not realize that protagonists such as Harry Potter, Frodo, Katniss Everdeen, and all other ancient heroes are variants of the same hero. This means that even though they are their own heroes of their epic adventures, their stories follow the same pattern. So now, what do these similarities tell us about the common human experience? At the end of the Hunger Games, we can sense that the districts have projected the image of rebellion with Katniss, and now she has returned with an elixir. Katniss brought hope. Hope is the thing that the capital has repeatedly killed each year by holding the annual games. This novel tells us a common human experience, that hope is what fuels the desire to overcome evil and injustice. Kill hope and no one will ever try. Now we are going to be discussing the last literary approach, which is the reader response. Reader response is the approach that makes the reader as the creator of meaning. It is not the text nor the author. The reader's purpose, concerns, needs, and experiences influence how the literary work is read and how meaning is created. The guide questions are the following. Are there any quotations, characters, or other elements in the work that have powerful impression and impact on me? Why do they leave such memorable effect on me? If I can interview the author, what questions would I ask? What made me confused, mad, or disapproving of the text? How can I connect this text to myself and to the world I live in? Let's pick one good question. I'm going to pick the fourth question, which is this. How can I connect this text to myself and to the world I live in? I see the Hunger Games as a warning against the celebrity culture and media. To achieve fame, people have to create a false image of themselves, just to be likable and to be the talk of the town. We can see in the novel that Katniss was taught to act a certain way, dress a certain way, to gain sponsors. The danger of media is that it is a tool to create the guilty pleasure of entertainment, driving people's attention away from the reality, away from serious matters. The citizens in the capital know that the tributes are going to literally die in the arena, but they don't care. They want to be entertained, so no one asks the more serious questions like their moral responsibility to stop the games. Using different approaches in critiquing a literary work unlocks many possible meanings. There is no single correct interpretation of a literary work, and we can actually transfer this type of thinking on real-life situations. Instead of thinking that your perspective is right and other people's perspectives are wrong, why not listen to their perspectives? You may eventually realize that your opinions and their viewpoints are as valid as yours. As social beings, we need to engage in dialogues that widen our understanding of human experiences, and you'll be surprised to see life with richer meaning. Now, let's walk through the different activities you need to accomplish in your learning activity sheet 3. May I remind you that you can directly write your answers on the learning activity sheet itself. The first activity is thinking it through. This is classified under written works. Identify the literary approach as defined in each item. Write your answer in the blank. The second activity is dissecting the text. This is also classified under written works. Analyze the poem I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by identifying the type of literary approach used. You need to read each analysis and identify the literary approach used. For instance, if this analysis concentrates on female experiences, then the literary approach used is feminism. And if this analysis focuses on morals and values, then the approach is moralism. By the way, I'm not giving the answers. I am just giving examples. The last activity is in your own words. This is classified under performance task. Compose a literary critique of the poem Lineage by Margaret Walker. Choose only one literary approach for your analysis. Write your critique in not less than 5 sentences. Be guided by the rubric below. Here's the rubric. So here's the poem you're going to critique. Lineage by Margaret Walker. My grandmothers were strong. They followed plows and bench toil. They moved through fields sowing seed. They touched earth and grain grew. They were full of sturdiness and singing. My grandmothers were strong. My grandmothers are full of memories, smelling of soap and onions and wet clay. With veins rolling roughly over quick hands, they have many clean words to say. My grandmothers were strong. Why am I not as they? Perhaps your question is, how can I compose a literary criticism? I'm going to give you a basic guide. First, read the literary text. And it means not just reading the text once. You have to read it twice, thrice, or maybe several times. Then, you have to use a dictionary to look for the meanings of unfamiliar words. You may use context clues to determine how the author defined the words in the text. Second, choose a literary approach. But it's important to remember that depending on what you're reading, there will be literary approaches that will work much better than others. And then, third, read the literary text with the literary approach in mind. For example, if you chose feminism, read the text with the intent on looking at female experiences. If it's Marxism you chose, read the text with a focus on social class struggle. If it's reader's response, then you have to read the text based on your own needs and experiences, likes and dislikes. And then the last step is this. Choose a guide question from the list of questions provided in each literary approach. Build your analysis and interpretation in 5 sentences. Again, I don't want you to forget this. It's important to remember that depending on what you are reading, there will be literary approaches that will work much better than others. Here are my references. Thank you so much for staying with me even though we had a very heavy discussion. Have a great day ahead.